Am I recording? Based on the World Anti-Doping Code 2021, the role and responsibilities of NOCs as well as NPCs, especially in specific areas like operational independence, conflict of interest, is very clearly stated. However, whatever which is written, it is sometimes good or all the time good to be able to explain clearly what it is all about. All right, that is the first role, first objective. The second objective is basically how NADOs as well as NOCs, NPCs can collaborate on various fronts. And I think this is the very first time, CRADO, if I remember, over the years, having bring together NOCs as well as the NADOs. All right. So with that, we will start off with this, with the presentations. We are really lucky and privileged to have Dr. Eva Senikune. Right? Did I pronounce your name correct, Eva? All right. Just a background of Dr. Eva. Eva was director of the Lithuanian NADO from 2005 to 2016. That's a long time. And after which in 2016, she was appointed by WADA to be an international expert in the RUSADA event, which all of you know. And she was handling that scene for about 3 years. And after which she joined WADA. Right now she's with WADA as a senior manager in NADO-RADO relations. She's based in Montreal. She leads in the implementation of both NADO program strategy and RADO program strategy. She was in the drafting team for the Guide of NADO Operational Independence. And that's pretty interesting for us to get her, someone who has been involved in developing the guideline, to come and speak to us. All right, so without further ado, Eva, all yours.
Okay, thank you. I will try to share my screen now. Just a second. Okay, can you see my screen? No, not sharing yet. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Yeah, to see it
Okay.
now.
Okay, can you see it?
Yep,
Yes.
we can see it. Yep.
Okay, so thank you, Gobi, for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to come today to this webinar and to do the presentation. You can interrupt me anytime if you have any questions, or you can wait until the end of presentation, and we can discuss whatever is interesting for you, or you have any questions. And if we will have such situations where I will not be able to respond immediately because a deeper assessment is needed, so we can send you the response after the meeting, or if you will get a question after the webinar, let's say how to interpret one or the requirement of operational independence for NADOs, you also can reach out Gobi, and Gobi will get an answer from us, or you can reach out us directly. So let's move to NADO operational independence and why it is important. So the NADO operational independence indeed is nothing new. It was already a requirement under the 2015 code. However, anti-doping community wanted to strengthen this requirement, and this was expressed in the consultation organized during the code review process, and this requirement was strengthened further. Also, NADO operational independence is monitored as a part of compliance program, and one of the tools to monitor if NADOs are operationally independent, it is a well-known CCQ code compliance questionnaires, and the questions regarding operational independence have been included and will be addressed accordingly. So it means that those NADOs will not be operationally independent, will get some corrective actions. So the main article which emphasizes requirement for NADO operational independence is Article 25.1, and we will refer to this article through the presentation. So keep this wording in mind. So if you look at the first part was one already presented in the 2015 code, that NADO shall be independent in their operational activities and decisions. And the second part is indeed newly added in 2021 code, so which says NADO shall be independent in their operational decisions and activities from sport and government, including without limitations by prohibited any involvement in their operational decisions or activities by any person who is at the same time involved in the management or operations of any IF, NF, MAO, NOC, NPC, or government department with the responsibility for sport or anti-doping. So I just will repeat again that we will refer to this wording during entire presentation several times. So please keep this wording in mind. So why we have developed this guide? We were asked by number of signatories for further guidance implementing requirements for NADO operational independence. So therefore, the guide has been developed for NADO operational independence. So you can find the guide on WADA's website, or we can share the link after the presentation again, where it can be found. The guide itself is very straightforward, and we encourage indeed to use it and to apply it. However, as I mentioned in the beginning, if you have any questions, you always can consult us, since cases may be specific and differ from one to each other. So sometimes probably it is hard to know how to implement them. So we just always can contact us, and we will provide explanation or advice or guidance. Let's have a look at the guide for better understanding of the requirements of NADO operational independence, which has to be respected by sport and government. So the guide consists of two parts, and the part one set out mandatory provisions that can be found in the code and will be monitored by WADA for compliance. Specifically, the mandatory provisions come from the code articles. You can see them on the screen, and it's 25.1, 24.3, 22.8, and 23.3. And the part two sets out recommended aspects that NADOs are encouraged to adopt as a best practices and provide some examples of implementation. So as I just mentioned in the previous slide, the mandatory requirements comes from for the NADO operational independence come directly from the code. And here on the screen, I put all these articles which I just mentioned. And we spoke already about the article 25.1. Another article I want to highlight, it is 24.3, and it says that the NOCs and NPCs shall respect the autonomy of NADO in their country and not to interfere with its operational decisions and activities. The same is about governments, that each government should respect the autonomy of NADO in its country and do not interfere with their operational decisions and activities. And another very important article, it is Article 23.3. It is about funding, that the signatories shall devote sufficient resources in order to implement anti-doping program in all areas that are compliant with the code and international standards. So funding is very important in order to ensure NADO operational independence. And NADOs, because they are signatories of the code, they have to have these sufficient resources to implement the code compliant anti-doping programs. So let's have a look at the mandatory requirements for NADO operational independence. If you read again the article 25.1, as I mentioned, we will refer during entire presentation to this article. There are 4 keywords that should retain your attention, and it is independence, operational activities, sports, and government. So the first objective we had when drafting this guide was to make sure these keywords can be properly understood. So we aimed at defining them as precisely as possible. So if we look at operational activities, so operational activities are the running of your anti-doping program. It is testing, distribution, planning, maintenance of registered testing pool, managing athletes' biological passports, organizing analysis of samples, gathering of intelligence of conducting investigations, processing of TV applications, conducting result management and hearings. In addition to that, the overall administration of day-to-day operations of the NADO related to any of these activities. So, and this would include staff, budget, scope, timing of activities, and etc. So all these activities are NADO operational activities, and no one from sport or government can interfere with them. So what is independence? Independence is understood as freedom to make decisions and carry out operational activities without being governed, controlled, or instructed by other person or organizations, such as IFs, NFs, MEOs, NOCs, NPCs, or government department. Article 25.1 says NADO shall be independent in their operational decisions and activities from sports and government. So what is sport? Sport is any person who is at the same time involved in the management or operations of any IF, NF, MEO, NOC, NPC, whatever, on paid or voluntary basis. And what is a government? Government is any person who is at the same time involved in the management or operations of government department with a responsibility for sport or anti-doping. So we just spoke about definitions of these 4 keywords, and now let's have a look how to make this work in practice. And there are 3 areas that you have to look into to ensure your NADO is operationally independent. So the first is governance, and key is to create a clear distinction between the executive, operational, and oversight functions. Operational independence means that the executive operational can conduct the operations of NADO without any interference from sport of NADO or government. No people from sports or government can be involved in NADO operations. No approval needed for operational activities, for example, such as testing. NADO operational functions have to be led by executive operational head of NADO. The second is high professional and integrity standards. It is applicable for both operational staff and oversight body. So these standards should be binding through effective and enforceable disciplinary measures, and these can be defined in the conflict of interest policy, for instance. And third, it is adequate resources, and I already spoke about Article 24.3. So the 20.3 article says the signatory shall devote sufficient resources in order to implement anti-doping programs in all areas that are compliant with the code and international standards. So adequate resources mean resources that allow NADO to run code-compliant anti-doping program. So these 3 areas are the ones that are monitored by WADA for compliance purposes. Those who received CCQ have already experienced that they have to answer a number of questions related to NADO operational independence. The code compliance monitoring program also will be implemented through other various compliance tools, such as continuous monitoring, audits, and etc. So then let's have a look what will be assessed. So governance structure, separation of executive, operational, and oversight functions, and a clear roles and responsibilities of each. What is the exact role of the oversight body? Does it have any say in operational matters such as defining TDP, for instance? Are they involved in the result management, for instance? The other is high professional and integrity standards. For example, is there a conflict of interest policy in place which defines what constitutes a conflict of interest, how it is managed when one appears, what are potential sanctions, and so on. So these two are high priority requirements. And for NADO to have adequate resources, it's a critical requirement. NADO must have clear and guaranteed assigned resources. Ask yourself, if NADO funding secured and stable over time, does it allow the NADO to run code-compliant anti-doping program based on its risk assessment? So we had a introduction to the first part, and now I want to also go through the recommended measures, which are considered as best practices in the area of NADO operational independence. So even they are recommended, these measures are very important. They are based on other international instruments, for example, UNESCO Convention or best practices, and contribute the achievement of the mandatory requirements. So if you implement the second part, which is recommended, you will help yourself to implement the first part, which is a mandatory requirements. So additionally, the part two addresses the importance of effective working relations between NADO, their government, and national sports bodies, and provides some examples how to ensure efficient coordination and cooperation in anti-doping area. So in this second part, we will look at good governance, management of conflict of interest, funding and budget management, legal safeguards for appointment and employment of executive head of NADO, transparency and accountability to the government and sports bodies, and as I just mentioned, cooperation with government and sports bodies. So now let's have a look at good governance. NADO executive operational functions should have a clearly specified mandate and include as a minimum into this mandate all operational activities. It should be NADO's authority to allocate its budget for certain programs. This should include ability to decide regarding operational activities needs, but also to include decisions on staffing and infrastructure based on its operational needs. NADO operational staff does risk assessment, TDP, estimates needs of anti-doping programs, so they are aware of operational needs of NADO. This also includes staff, even if the NADO employees, for example, are public servants. The executive operational head of NADO should have ability to take independent decisions in recruiting or dismissing the staff with required expertise, of course, respecting the national legislation. So let's have a look at NADO oversight body. And NADO oversight body should have defined criteria for the appointment of the oversight body. Such criteria should include solid experience, professional qualifications, good reputations, and of course, no conflict of interest. This criteria also should include the grounds for dismissal, length of mandate, and possibility for its extension. The appointment or dismissal of oversight body members should not be subjected to personal bias or political influence. Always the best needs of NADOs has to be priority. NADO oversight body should represent a wide spectrum of knowledge, such as public health, law, medicine, science, intelligence, but also as well as athletes. Athletes' participation in anti-doping governance is recommended in the Athletes Anti-Doping Rights Act, and NADOs are encouraged to consider how this might best fit within their governance process. So all or at least majority of members should be independent from the government and national sports bodies. And functions of the NADO oversight body should be clearly specified and documented, for example, through the term of reference. And these functions cannot include any operational activities. I will repeat again that these functions cannot include operational activities. For example, the NADO oversight body may discuss and endorse the overall NADO strategic plan, approve NADO annual reports, policies, and etc. However, the NADO oversight body shall not be involved in any executive operational functions or decisions how to implement the activities related to strategic plan, budget, and etc. So management of conflict of interest, it's very important part, and NADO should ensure proper management of conflict of interest or situations appearing to be a conflict of interest. And the policies should apply to all members of NADO executive functions, including staff, and also to oversight body. So these policies should include a requirement, for example, to sign a declaration of conflict of interest, outline the process to assess and address conflict of interest situations, and address their involvement in other private or public activities. Policies may include the designation of ethics officer to assess potential conflict of interest within NADO. However, we understand that some NADOs may not have such ability, and interpretation of some NADO operational dependent requirements may be not clear for them. So again, I encourage them to come to us and ask questions. Funding and budget management. I already mentioned that in the beginning that funding and sufficient resources is very important part of NADO operational independence. And there are some measures recommended in a field of funding and budget management. So although NADO funding can be obtained from various sources, the core funding should be obtained from the regular source such as government. For example, the NADO also may be funded by NOC, NPC, or NF, or other sources such as public lotteries or private funding. However, the NADO should ensure that the source of funding is not in a conflict with the mission of the NADO and does not require any involvement or input into its operational activities as a result of this funding. So NADO funding should be secured by law, sustainable and adequately reliable, allowing the NADO to plan its priorities for several years ahead. And all sources of funding should be provided and managed in transparent and accountable manner, demonstrating the NADO's operational independence. NADO executive operational functions should have complete authority to decide how to use its assigned budget without further approval of any government unit or sports bodies for entire budget cycle. For example, hire and manage staff independently, of course, respecting the local legislation, decide how to spend allocated funds based on its operational needs, considering NADO's responsibility under the Code 20.5, and reallocate funds between its operational functions or different elements or its anti-doping programs as needed. Legal safeguards for appointment and employment of executive head of NADO and national law and regulations should ensure that mandate of the executive operational head of NADO does not depend or is not impacted by changes in political powers or government in the country. And for example, that he should not lose their position as an executive head of NADO as a result of political changes. So here has to be stability. Therefore, there should be clearly defined the process to appoint the executive operational head of NADO, which should be transparent, apolitical, timely, and based on qualifications and experience. The appointment criteria, for example, relevant experience, professional qualifications, good reputation, no conflict of interest, and the length of mandate and the possibility to extend this mandate in line with the applicable national legislation, and the ground for dismissal and effective judicial review process to challenge the dismissal. Transparency and accountability to the government and national sports bodies. So operational independence cannot be absolute. It should be counterbalanced with accountability and transparency for their decisions. And NADO's accountability should be clearly defined. And NADO needs to be accountable for its activities. For example, for presenting of NADO annual reports and multi-annual strategic plans to the government and or national sports bodies. Adhere to all public disclosure requirements of the code and international standards, for example, timely publish IDRVs, and communication and publication of key activities and financial documents to the general public and media, of course, respecting confidentiality requirements. This also should include financial accountability, and NADO should have a clear financial policy in place to process and control finances within organization. The NADO accounts should be audited by independent external auditor and or subjected to public or state audits. And it is important to discuss a cooperation between NADO and sports and government, while interference in NADO operational activities is prohibited by sport and government. Indeed, NADO should have effective relationship with local stakeholders and work together to protect clean sport. So we have provided some examples in the guide and provided how stakeholders can cooperate, for example, because we received a lot of questions, and the main question regarding cooperation was in the field of education. Can NOC and NADO to cooperate in the field of education? And speaking about education, the role of different signatories in education area is clearly outlined in the international standard for education and the code. So the code article 18.2.3 states that signatories shall coordinate their education efforts to minimize duplication and maximize the effectiveness of education programs. Government authorities, NOCs, NPCs, and NFs should cooperate with NADO in conducting their education program. However, the code article 25.9 states that NADO shall be authority on education as it relates to the clean sport within their respective country. And another example under the code article 22, it's involvement of governments in the area of investigations. Government and NADOs should cooperate in sharing intelligence information with law enforcement agencies and in protecting whistleblowers. NADO does not necessarily have the required resources for investigations, so cooperation between NADO and law enforcement is important to establish anti-doping rule violations. And this is only a couple of examples. There are more areas for cooperation as required by the various code articles, as you can see listed here on the slide. Elaborating further on cooperation, I will touch on the article 20.4 roles and responsibilities of NOCs and NPCs. NOCs and NPCs as a code signatory shall apply requirements under the code, and I'm not going to read all of them. You can find them in the code, or you can discuss any specific. We can discuss any specific roles and responsibilities of NOCs and NPCs after the presentation. But I put on the slide two two roles and responsibilities. And one already I mentioned, it's respect the autonomy of the NATO in their country and do not interfere in its operational decisions and activities. And the NOCs and NPCs shall to cooperate with relevant national anti-doping organizations and agencies and other anti-doping organizations. So there are requirements for cooperation, and such requirements for cooperation could be to support NADO's people, athletes' whereabouts, or other relevant information important for testing program, for example, such as composition of national team prior major event. To work with NATO and do not fund those who serve period of ineligibility, ensure that person who has been suspended for ADRVs, for anti-doping rule violations are not employed, and etc. And again, there are just only few examples how NADOs and NOCs can cooperate, and we can discuss it more after the presentation. So I also wanted to put this picture graph on the slide just to show how in practice can work NATO governance and accountability mechanisms. So here we see NATO executive operational functions. And NATO executive operational functions should report to NATO oversight body, and the NATO oversight body reports to NATO government and national sports bodies. So funding should come directly to NATO executive operational functions, and NATO operational functions, when they spend this budget, they have to be audited by independent auditor or state audit, and then they have to report back for the used funds. Also, you can see the way, for cooperation, indeed, NATO executive operational functions, they should cooperate with government, NOCs, NPCs. And when we talk about NATO executive operational functions, NATO oversight body, and hire those who are involved in any activities of NATO, they should be bounded by the conflict of interest policy. So here is my contact details on the screen. You can remember it, or you can ask Bobby if you will have further questions. And thank you for your attention. And now I will stop sharing and I can answer your questions.
Thank you, Eva. I think before we take any questions, some of you might be wondering, this seems to be talking too much on operational independence of NADOs, but I think Eva has also touched on the NOCs. And I think now I will share my screen and touch a little bit on this region. All right, just give me a minute. Okay, so I think moving forward, I think it's important to see in perspective this region. All right, there's always a question of initially, if you talk about 10 years ago, half the countries in this region did not have a NATO. All right, and over the last 10 years, almost everyone now has a NATO. And when I say everyone has a NATO, 10 countries of Southeast Asia has a NATO. Timor-Leste is in the process of having a NATO. When a NATO is formed, prior to the NATO being formed, it is the NOC that did the job of anti-doping. However, with the NADOs being formed, things do change in the NOC. In some instances, it did not change. In some instances, we do see conflicting messages as to who is running the anti-doping in the country, right? Now, this is a quick snapshot of the formation of NADOs in this region, all right? And I put the name of the NATO, the year form, as you can see, almost everyone. In Timor-Leste, the NOC functions as the NATO, all right? At the same time, we wanted to look at the existing committee in the NOC, all right? I will just quickly go through. In some countries like Brunei, there's no medical committee in the NOC, because if there's any event, then the NOC calls upon the sports medical center for the support. In Cambodia, there's a Sports Science and Medical Committee, but Mr. Sok is here. There's a director, deputy director, medical and anti-doping. Indonesia, it's a medical committee. Laos is a medical committee. In Malaysia, it's a ASEAN Medical and Anti-Doping Committee. Myanmar Medical Committee. Philippines, there's no medical committee. Anti-doping Singapore, they call it Medical Commission. In the DCAT, it's a Medical and Sports Science Committee. And of course, in Timor-Leste, Medical Committee. And in Vietnam, it is the Sports Medicine and Anti-Doping Commission. So there is nothing wrong in using the word anti-doping, but I think the stakeholders, whether be athletes, whether be other stakeholders, need to be very, very clear on the roles of the NADO versus the role of the NOC. All right, more so with this topic on operational independence that Eva has just explained. So having said that, if there is a word anti-doping there in the existing NOC, our question here, or not question, our thoughts is some of the things to consider, the points to consider for the NOCs and NPCs. What is the terms of reference of the anti-doping committee or the medical and anti-doping committee in the NOC? If you tell me the terms of reference is the same 10 years ago and now, it is a bit hard to digest because, as I mentioned to you, 10 years ago, we only had about 4 NADOs in the region, 4 or 5. Now we almost have everyone having a NADOs. So was the terms of reference of the Medical Anti-Doping Committee reviewed? Secondly, there should not be a duplication of work with that of the NADO. I think Eva has clearly indicated what the roles of the NADO, the operational independence, the NADO oversight body, the NADO executive body, etc. Thirdly, the work covered by NADO should not be the domain of the NOC Anti-Doping Committee. All right. So again, is there a place for NOC NPC? My answer is yes. But what is the place? We will touch on very soon. Committee members should not have a conflict of interest. All right. Eva has also clearly indicated, all right, certain members serving the NADO should not be in the NOC because there's clearly a conflict of interest. And we can highlight a couple of instances or scenarios where there will be a conflict of interest. So this is something we want all NOCs, NPCs to consider because there is really a need to review the terms of reference. Okay. The next thing is with regards to, how can NOCs and NPCs then help? I think there is a need for a greater collaboration between NADOs and NOCs. When a NADO is formed, there is sometimes some NOCs, this is what I hear, I don't have evidence, is what I hear. They said, okay, this is none of our business, all right, leave it everything to the NADO, all right? And there's sometimes not even cooperation because the provision of selected athletes' information, travel details are sometimes with the NOC. And it is the NOC, we would really appreciate if the NOCs can collaborate with the NADOs to provide this information. So they would really know when to test, etc. I think NOCs and NPCs can play a big way in supporting anti-doping education. We heard of countries where they tell athletes to do the anti-doping module. They're not interested because they find NADO don't have a kind of a hand in them. All right. So that's the other area which you can collaborate. The third area is assist in intelligence and investigation. If ever there is certain cases that have come out and the NOC is privy to some of this information or could be able in a position. Next one, there's also the Olympic Solidarity Fund. As you know, the NADOs are also supported by the government in terms of funding. Sometimes in terms of their activities, they are limited due to funding. They can always collaborate with the NOC to look into getting Olympic Solidarity funding for anti-doping activities. the last but not least is the collaboration with the NADOs to form anti-doping athlete committee. I know very well that in the West, and I say in the West, they want a totally exclusive anti-doping athlete committee and not part of NOC. But looking at the nature of this region, if the NOC athlete committee in some ways can play the role of anti-doping athlete committee, or if there can be some members who can join the NADO's athlete committee, that would be good, because these athletes are really great role models and they can really impact on the young, especially in the area of anti-doping education and changing their thought processes, etc. Okay. So having said that, all right, I hope it is very clear now with regards to the NOC. If you do have a medical anti-doping committee, review your terms of reference. I hope you're very clear with regards to the conflict of interest. Okay, and this also, the 2021 code, I must also say, and its implication on the recent SEA Games or the ASEAN Para Games. Okay, I am not sure, because CRODO have tried our level best to assist the SEA Games Federation or the SEA Games Organizing Committee, similar to the ASEAN Parasports Federation, ASEAN Parasport. This is not a signatory. If you tell me before 2021, were they signatory? Actually, even before 2021, the SEA Games Federations were never a signatory. But what actually happened in 2015, the SEA Games anti-doping rules, all right, the late Dr. Tay from Singapore put in a lot of effort to ensure the anti-doping rules are in line with the 2015 code. However, with the 2021 code, there has been changes, and if you are not a signatory and there are games, the NADO rules need to be applied to the games. So recently is the Vietnam anti-doping rules that apply to the SEA Games this year. And next year, it will be the Cambodian anti-doping rules that will be applied to the games. Whether anyone has really studied deep into this and whether there's a need to relook into this is something for the SEA Games Federation to look into. All right. And of course, if the NADO comes in, the operational independence need to be accorded to the NADO. And I think this idea of operational independence, you might think that why Eva touched quite a bit on the NADO's operational independence. I hope you can see the link here, because in this region, SEA Games is a relatively important event. And I think if the NADO, you're applying the NADO rules, the operational independence need to be accorded to the NADO. Right? I think that is my last slide. Right? We will now open to questions. I think it is a really good opportunity to ask as whatever questions you have, doubts you have, to clarify. We also have someone in WADA. Please either raise your hands or you can put it in the chat. Yes, Dr. Chima. Please unmute yourself. Yep.
Hi, Gopi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Leva, for a nice talk. I've got two questions for you. See, overall, the presentation has been basically the total independence of NADO. All right. That includes employment, operation, budget. If WADA is not giving money to the NADO to be independent, they have to be dependent on the government. How can they be totally independent when the funding comes from the government? The budget control, even employment. We can say, they need to be independent, but it's not that easy in any other country also. So I find that would be a bit of a task that needs to be defined in a proper way, because they are totally dependent on the government for the funding and the abuse that takes place. Now, we got you said oversight body. In that oversight body, again, you said there should be nobody from the government. There should be nobody from the sports bodies. Without the experience of the sports bodies or the government functioning, how are they going to play the role of an oversight body? Thank you.
Thank you, Chima. I think before I let Eva answer the second part, I think Dr. Chima, Eva has mentioned, yes, almost all countries, they depend the budget on the government, all right? So I think she has clearly indicated accountability versus operational independence. I think we must be very, very clear of these two elements. On one hand, there's operational independence. On the other hand, it's accountability. Whoever gives you the money, obviously, you got to be accountable for them. All right, I probably would like to give you one or two experiences which I've come across in this region. All right, in one NADO, all right, the person who is the head, not the head of the NADO, all right, the so-called government entity, had asked, who are you testing? We'd like to know who you are testing. All right, so it was clearly told to the individual, we can't let you know who we are testing because testing is an operational independent thing. However, this idea of oversight body, etc., is something where it is structured so that there is accountability to the government. I hope I made that clear. But before Eva continues, Eva, there is one or two other questions, and this might be
Gopi, you gave the answer.
Yeah.
Just to elaborate on what you said. Operational independence is 100% no doubt. All right. I think that should be accepted by everybody. That is no doubt about that. But the question I'm asking is the budget. 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. Who is going to get the money? The government. Not the NOC, not WADA, not CIRADO. So how you expect a NADO to be totally independent when they are depending on the government for the money? A second thing which I stated just now, you said the budget check and balance, oversight body, all right? If the oversight body doesn't have a government guy who knows the structure of the government running and a sports body guy, how are you going to get the oversight body? Whom? I mean, who is going to sit on the oversight body? Who do not know anything about sports?
Sorry, I was coming to that question actually, all right? The question, let me just answer this question first and let Eva mention, because that's linked to what you're going to mention, all right? Eva, the question is the NADO oversight body. It says it's independent from government and sports bodies. I got one question here. When you say it's independent from government and sports body, the question is, can someone representing the NOC, can someone representing the government sit on the oversight body? Maybe you answer that question first. That will probably clarify that. You're muted, Eva. Eva, you're muted.
Sorry, yeah. If you read the guide for NADO operational independence, it says that majority or all members of oversight body should be independent from sports or government. And everything is related to the role of NADO oversight body. So if NADO oversight body includes anyone from sports or government, so then clearly distinction of the roles has to be specified. It has to be very, very clear that NADO oversight body has nothing to say in NADO operational activities, has no relations with NADO operational activities. It is how, you know, like the powers are separated, because it doesn't, like, operational independence prohibits involvement of government on sport or sport into NADO operational activities. So if you have someone from sports or government on oversight body, you have very clear, have to have very clear policies in place showing that NADO oversight body is not involved in NADO operational activities. So technically, even it is not recommended to have sports or government on an oversight body, because it's we say majority or all members should be independent. So it still may happen. If such things happens, you have to have, you know, all processes and the regulations in place to separate their powers. Here is another operations and here is another oversight. Another oversight body has to have very clearly specify the mandate, what they can do, and it is approve policies, approve multi-annual strategical plans, approve reports, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to NADO funding, that's normal that NADO would be funded by government. As I mentioned, it should be secure funding, and the main source probably will be government. And this secure funding, should be secured by legislation, for example. It is how this money managed, how much government has to say how this money is spent. If they want, to be involved in all operational activities, then it's no, they cannot be. It is like NADO's decision, regarding the operational activities. So when NADO does their annual budget, they calculate how much money they need, they will spend, they can have a general plan in the budget. But when it comes, to reshuffling budget between programs, when deciding on what program to spend, it is NADO's responsibility, operational responsibility. And there are processes in place for government to be confident that that money was spent properly. It's an audit and it's a reporting. So you got you have contract, you got the money, you spend money properly, you report it on that, you publish the report available for everyone how you spend money, and here's fine. Like it is bad then someone comes and tells, okay, I want to know whom and when you are testing someone, or how much money you need for result management. Then it's bad because then it limits NADO operational activities. So I hope I answered the question.
Well, somehow slightly you've answered, but still the question, my question is very, very, maybe it's, when you sit in a chair, you might feel that it's quite easy, but to get funding from the government is not that easy. All right. Some governments are rich, some governments are poor, and I foresee that is the biggest issue, because they will not simply throw money away. Example, if there's abuse in the NADO audit, done 10,000 tests instead of doing 5,000 with this limitation. All right. They're done over expenses, claiming allowances running here, and I'm just giving hypothesis. That's examples only.
Yeah,
right.
I think
yeah.
these are where each government here in the region, I think we got to be confident of what they do. They actually have processes in place. In fact, from my own experience, they have more difficulty getting money to go for trips, etc., than even getting money in the first place. All right. So I think there are two things.
Wait. Copy, I haven't finished. So they come back square one. All right. So if there are processes in place, that is government interference, isn't it?
No. I think we need to be very, very clear here. I think when we talk about operational independence,
I said no way, nobody can interfere. When they said they want to do the test and it's requirement in the it's a athletic meet.
I think you missed the point, Dr. Chima. What we are trying to say is not total dependence. What the term we use here is operational independence. It's different from total independence. When we talk about operational independence, just hang on. All right, there's a couple of things. We shouldn't be telling who we are testing, why we are testing certain, etc., because they have the systems in process of doing a risk management, risk assessment, etc. Number two, I'm just highlighting two main areas. If somebody is found doping, is on charge, there should not be a governmental interference, because even in Malaysia, you got a separate independent results management committee now. All right. So I think beyond this, let me know what are the other things when you talk about operational independence, but don't use the word total independence. It's not about total independence. It's about operational independence.
I did stress in the beginning, my first line was, I totally agree with operational independence. I said that. I didn't mislead on that part.
Okay.
But what I'm stressing upon is always dollars and cents.
Yeah.
When dollars and cents are concerned, everybody's eyes open up.
Yeah.
See, until unless the NADO is self-funded, or coming money for the top somewhere, then I say they're not answerable to anybody except maybe WADA or CIRADO. If they depend on the government, it's easy said and done.
Yeah. But to be very honest with you, I think I'm very appreciative of all the governments in the region. and they're pretty supportive of all the NADOs in the region this far. All right, because the NADOs are able to articulate to the governments and rationalize with the government why they need a certain amount of money.
Okay, fair enough. Just now, I think, Liva, you have digested the
Yeah,
part that you said on oversight body. All right. And I stress that if the government or a sports body chap is not sitting in oversight body, who will not know how the system functions in NADO, it becomes something a bit difficult. But it said they can. So far as they do not interfere in the operational part of it. That's fair.
Yeah.
That I agree. Because you need experienced guys there,
Yeah.
in the oversight body, which is a very important part of every NADO now.
Yeah.
Because they're going to look at how they're going to function and how the money is spent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else has any other questions?
Yeah, one more. Okay, one more.
Yeah, sure.
There's one part where NADO is nothing to do with the NOC, NPC and all that. Okay. That's forming the committee, like our Olympic Council of Malaysia, Medical and Anti-Doping Committee. Now, workable side. You also mentioned between that they can cooperate and discuss things and all that. Don't take the title as such into tow, all right? It is not taking the job of the NADO. Here, if we, during our meeting, have a NADO head sitting with us, we can discuss a lot of things, education part. That is the motive. Not taking over NADO. We never did that, and we have no motive at all. NADO is totally independent in Malaysia. But the wording shouldn't be taken as written there, doping, medical, anti-doping. NADO is not anti-doping. NADO is National Anti-Doping Organization.
Yeah, we are very well aware, Dr. Chima. We are very well aware of this.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why this very platform was put forward, not to mention any countries, the NADOs, certain NADOs or NOCs terms of reference, there was a conflict. All right,
Maybe
number
some,
one.
maybe some.
There were instances whereby people were serving in resource management in the NADO are also serving in the resource management of the NOC, which becomes a conflict of interest too.
I think at that time was a time when all these NADOs are not well structured, So some of the countries, the NOCs were doing the result management, the hearing, everything.
Yeah.
Now they're all well structured.
Yeah, so I think it is important for us to emphasize this, so we don't move one step forward and two steps back.
No, we're definitely not going backwards at all, because the title does not implicate that you're taking over the operations of the NADO. NADO is a totally independent body. The word National Anti-Doping Organization from a subcommittee, where we did discuss together. That's important.
Yeah, we are aware of that. Yeah.
All right.
Any other questions, anyone? I think it's a very good opportunity. Pak Gatot, have you got a question?
Yes, I would like to ask something, Mr. Govin and Madam Leva. Madam Leva mentioned something, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me my statement, that there should be any possibility for any NADO to get other financial sources, not only from the government, but from other sources, as far as there is no conflict of interest. My question is, for example, if there will be any education activity, and then one of the commercial company would like to provide not directly the fresh money, but the so-called the sponsorship. So it is on the category of prohibited or no for such thing, because I have the pleasure to let you know, due to the racing trust in Indonesia to the IADO, now there are mounting national federation as well as the commercial company would like to approach us to back up the education, but we would like to ask us, for example, Pak Gatot, is it possible for us to back up not through the fresh money, but for the other activity, that we don't want to violate the regulation? Thank you, Mr. Govin and Madam Leva.
Eva, would you like to touch on this?
Yeah, I can explain more on this. As I mentioned, yes, NADO may have, like other funding sources, and one of them can be sponsorship, but this should not be in conflict with NADO's operations. And when you look at this type of funding, you should ask yourself, okay, what is the result of this funding? What they want from me? If it is only education, sponsoring some gifts for education and so on and so forth, and nothing else, that's fine. But if like they say we'll give you money, but then NOC wants to know whom you're going to test, then it's bad. So that you can't accept this money. So it's it has to be money for the certain purpose, and it should not be in conflict with NADO. Anti-doping programs and interests. And also what else we have to consider is the reputation of this company, what they do indeed, what they produce. So it would be, the other point to consider. But if it is no conflict and company is good, then there is no issues that they will fund your education program, for example.
If I
Thank
could
you,
just
Madam Leva.
Yeah.
Gatot, if I could just add to that, I think there are NADOs, like the Japan Anti-Doping Agency.
Yeah.
They do get funding from the lottery. All right. So that's one option. Eva, I am not sure. There are some countries where, based on the sports funding to different national federations, a certain proportion is gone to anti-doping. Is there such cases?
Can you repeat, Kobe?
Well, if certain funding from the government is going to the national federation, and each national federation has a certain amount of money, within that certain amount of money, a small portion goes to anti-doping.
It is how it is managed. All these, yeah, if, for example, they they can be a case, then a funding goes to NFs, and then NADO is dependent on NFs that they somehow would sponsor testing. Then it's not efficient. That this should not be this way. But if NF have some monies to support education programs, yes, they can. It's case based. You can't say yes or no. It is how it is used. As I mentioned, NADOs can get monies from NFs, but again, it should not be a contradiction with the main NADO functions. They should not get a right for that to interfere or influence somehow NADO operational activities.
Right. So sports lottery is one option. I've seen a NADO getting a normal sports drink, which is actually found even in the doping control station, sponsoring the drinks and the speakers for talks, etc. That's another possibility. But I am not sure whether in this region any NOCs have actually worked with the NADO to tap on the Olympic Solidarity Fund, because there's one Olympic Solidarity Fund in the area of clean and healthy athletes which can be tapped on. And of course, we have our friends from Lao NADO who recently got US 20,000 for their under the UNESCO funding. So likewise, something to consider. Any other questions with regards to this? All right, we hope this idea of operational independence is clear. Our purpose is to get the NOCs, because although it is in the code, we felt that it is important to have a platform like this to really explain what operational independence means, as well as its implications, as well as I said, continue to collaborate. I'm not judging anything on the terms you use, whether medical or anti-doping, but get the terms of reference correctly, and there's people with no conflict of interest. We just want to move ahead in this region towards a better clean sport area. I think that's about it. Yes, Dr. Chima, you got a question?
Yeah,
still?
but thanks, Gopi. I still feel it's advantage for the NOC to have somebody from NATO in the committee. They can give us all the updates, what's the latest. Sometimes athletes do meet up with, or the presence of the national federation, ask us about doping. So we
Sure.
have been advised them.
Sure.
So we shouldn't prevent the committee from having somebody from NADO sitting with us. It is
Of course.
beneficial to the committee a lot because all the new trends, new acts, everything can be explained to us.
Sure,
So far
sure.
as we are not interfering, we are not asking them whom you're testing, how many you're testing. No, but to advise and share knowledge, I think it's
okay.
important.
No, you have to correct me if I'm wrong. If the head of the NADO sits on the NOC or the deputy head, is there a conflict of interest, Eva?
It depends on term of reference of the roles of these committees.
All
So
right,
again,
yeah.
cases can be different. And if you have such situations, what I suggest, you send us the request with the role of that committee, and we will see, like if it is operational or involved in the management. And if, like it is at that level, then other people cannot be on this committee. But if it is something strategic, so like it is case-based, but you always can invite other people, like in cooperation matters, to give some update or news on anti-doping, what is new, what your committee members should know, and so on and so forth. It's not necessary this person has to be a member, but if, like, it is like this committee, it's at some point, like as a management or operational, has operational role, then no, then other people cannot be there.
So I think
your ex already clearly stated that NOCs cannot interfere in their operational aspect of NADO. That's clear cut. I think everybody can understand that. What I said was sharing knowledge, discussing certain
sharing
topics.
Cooperation, yes. Cooperation, yes. But to be a
Yeah.
member of the committee, it's on like a case-based. We have to see what is the role of the committee. So if you want us to study this situation further, you can send request to Gobi. He will forward to me, and we will provide you guidance.
I think there's a point here by Azura. Azura said the NADO rep can be an ex officio in the NOC. All right. But I think my main concern is people involved in results management should not be also in the NOC. As much as you say the terms, a person involved in results management coming in and sitting in the NOC is a conflict of interest. All right. I've actually sent that to WADA for their inputs, and WADA has given me a very clear input that if a person is sitting in a NOC and who is also in a NADO as in the results management, that is a conflict of interest. And I think I made it very clear to the respective NADOs who had that situation. All right. Okay. Any others? Any other questions? If not, thank you very much. Our doors are always open for you to have any questions. We are not a business entity. We are only trying to make clean sport better, right? If not, it would be lovely to have all your videos on for just a short. If you can on your videos, it's nice to see everybody's faces.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Gobin. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Leva.
Thank you. Great pleasure.
Thank you, Madam Leva.
Let's have a few more people
Thank
opening
you.
their videos, and then soon we can take it to the crowd.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wan.
Muhammad.
Thank you, Dr. Shah.
So you can take it now. Yeah. Much. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you. If you have any questions, let us know.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.